It has been quite eventful and quite interesting. When I came, soon after there was the COVID threat in Tanzania specifically, as it's been going on already in other parts of the country. I must say that, first of all, I'm very grateful to the government of the United Republic of Tanzania giving me a chance to work in this beautiful country with these wonderful people. I was also very privileged to join a UN country team of my colleagues, which is very strong. A lot of dedicated professionals, excellent leaders, as well as technical experts who have been really helping this country and supporting it many years. So it was relatively easy to become part of the system. And then with COVID, it was quite a demanding task, both for the government and for the United Nations in support of the government and the people of Tanzania, how to navigate the new territories, the new environment. It was very important to not forget why we're here and to continue our work on development in a number of sectors, but at the same time to react very fast and effectively to this threat of COVID. So it was a combination of prioritizing new things that were urgent and important emergencies, while at the same time making sure that a lot of those goals and objectives that we have in the national plan, that we have in the United Nations Cooperation Framework or our so-called United Nations Development Assistance Plan, that they still don't just all get halted because of the threat. So it has been a busy, eventful 6 months, which I think we have collectively as a country, as a group of partners, navigated reasonably well.
How has the UN family supported Tanzania in coping with the coronavirus disease, COVID-19?
Well, COVID-19 is a very, very serious threat, unprecedented to the best of my memory and to many of those who are observing the situation. It is a global threat. As of today, we're worse off than we have been ever in the past in terms of numbers of new infections, numbers, deaths, and so far. So it's a serious, recurring threat. There are countries that get better and then situation can deteriorate. So we must remain vigilant. I think it was very important that the government of Tanzania took immediate steps when COVID was on the doors of the country and introduced a lot of very important measures to mitigate the risks, to minimize exposure, to advise people to socially distance, to disinfect, to stay safe. We at the UN system, we have followed the lead of our World Health Organization in really supporting the government trying to deal with this task. We have technical experts who have been helping set up procedures, processes, technical experts who helped put in place systems for something that we have not seen before, how to deal with, how to treat people, how to make sure that we are safe while we're doing that. We have helped with procurement and support with some critical items that were very important, like PPE kits, masks, test kits, and similar other equipment and materials that were essential to deal with it. I think our collective work in communication and advocacy and messaging to people what to do, what not to do, how to behave was very important. I think UN colleagues have done a very professional job in supporting the Ministry of Health in particular, but government as a whole, in dealing with the prevention and response to COVID. I hope that we will continue to be vigilant and make sure that we are prepared to react in case that COVID numbers start going up, because we never know. We have countries, as I said, who have good results and then things deteriorate. What is important is to stay on top of the situation, to monitor, to be aware of what's the situation in the country and to react swiftly. I think it's also very important that we learn from global examples as well as to have strong regional cooperation, because challenges like COVID-19 cannot be defeated on our own. None of us. We need to be a partnership.
Thank you for your response. I was just thinking about this year being a very interesting year for the United Nations. The United Nations is going to be 75. It is 75 this year. And I know you have vast experience working in the UN from what you have initially informed us. Could you give us any examples of some success stories or achievements of the United Nations in the past 75 years that you're aware of and that you'd like to share with the public?
Well, we could speak about the United Nations and its achievements all day today, because there are many. I think without the United Nations, the world would look much different today, and I think would be much worse. We all know of many wars that have been stopped or prevented because of the convening power of the United Nations, its mediation roles. Yes, situations can get difficult and can take time, but there is peace in many quarters because of one way or another United Nations getting involved. And United Nations remains committed to get involved in these situations, to prevent the wars, to resolve disputes, also to criminally pursue those who have committed international crimes. Political roles, military roles, depending on the need. We also know that the United Nations is always among the first to support governments and communities when there are natural disasters, which we cannot predict, whether they're earthquakes or floods or drought and similar other things. United Nations is always on forefront, coming and providing the necessary assistance, setting up systems, but also providing the materials that are required to help people overcome that initial shock, go back with their lives, resume their livelihoods, be resilient for the future. There are many programs, joint and otherwise, that the United Nations have put in place across the world, dealing with decolonization, working against apartheid, dealing with some critical humanitarian crises, which are quite visible, and we hear them every day on the news, and we hear about the work every day. So it's very difficult to take specific examples. I would say what is very important and the biggest achievement of the United Nations is that it's there, that it's always responsive, and that it always tries its best. And it has the capacity, because there are over 30 different entities within the United Nations who will have expertise for specific things, and brought together, we always give quite a solid support to governments and people when they have to deal with challenges, and when we want to help them improve and develop more and develop better.
Could you please come again on the issue of goals? Do you think the UN has been successful in setting up goals and achieving these goals?
Well, the United Nations is a community of states and nations, and it tries to help them all improve their lives, well-being, progress, and develop. Millennium Development Goals were not achieved to the maximum, but we have certainly reduced disparities to quite a noticeable degree. We have learned from them, and this is why Sustainable Development Goals have gone a step further and have had much more ambitious targets. They're very challenging targets, but they're achievable in every country. For example, in Tanzania, the government is very committed to work towards the Agenda 2030 and the Sustainable Development Goals. And last year they had the so-called national review, or voluntary national review of the achievements. And we have realized there that against some Sustainable Development Goals, we are having better progress than others. So this is where we as the United Nations can offer an extra help in really trying to improve on those where some countries might be lagging behind and where they might need more expertise, support, help in achieving them. our achievements in life are never, unfortunately, up to the maximum. But I think what is important is to be persistent, to keep identifying the priorities, to keep identifying what's important and what's critical. And I think, above all, we must make sure that we do not leave anyone behind, which is something that we often say in the United Nations work, leaving no one behind. It's very important to make sure that as we go towards progress, we move the whole communities and all the people.
More specifically, what are you doing for UN at 75 here in Tanzania?
75 years, as you said, is an important milestone. We're very happy and proud to have reached it, and many more, I hope, with the same positive attitude and successes in terms of results. In Tanzania, we will definitely have a very important event in Dodoma with the government, probably in October, to really commemorate these 75 years, and that is going to be a milestone of our work here. However, we have already been working quite a lot in giving people a chance to express their views. We've even been working on translating some of the global surveys to Kiswahili to reach as many people as we can, or give them a chance to tell us what kind of future they want, what kind of United Nations they want. We have also organizing various webinars, and it's quite convenient quite appropriate under current circumstances, to really educate people about the work of the United Nations, to learn from them what we could do more and better. We will have various media campaigns across the system of the United Nations to really bring the United Nations closer to the people so that they understand it a bit better, as well as that they interact with us more. And that we, in our important anniversary, learn more about how we could be better, how we could be advancing the lives of people in a more sustainable way.
Are you planning to engage youth and children, bearing in mind that this is a larger part of the Tanzanian population? Are you having competitions or anything?
Absolutely. Youth are a very important segment in all societies, and in many there is quite a long way to really address their needs and expectations better. And they will be carrying these societies very soon on their backs, as they say. We are organizing different events, consultations, as well as competitions in literary and paint, artwork and other things to really promote the United Nations, but also to learn from them through these activities about our better engagement.
In June 2020, the World Bank declared or proclaimed Tanzania to be a middle-income country. What does this mean, reflecting on the work of the UN family here? Do you feel you've had a role, the UN has played a role to make Tanzania be where it is today?
I think it is a very important, a significant achievement of the government of the United Republic of Tanzania under President John Pombe Magufuli to have achieved this landmark and recognized by the World Bank with its new status. I think it was done because Tanzania has invested a lot of its own resources and its own engagement in achieving these things, relying much less on external assistance compared to many countries or even past administrations of this government. This was an important decision, investing in industrialization, in infrastructure, in free access to health and education being very important things that the government has done. They must be congratulated for this significant achievement. It is important to maintain it, and in view of the challenges such as the COVID pandemic, which is global and affects everybody, despite the fact that some countries manage it better than others, because of climate change, because of many other things that have been proven to need improvement because of these challenges that we have. I think it's very important that we continue working. Now, United Nations has had, in my view, an important role in supporting many countries, including United Republic of Tanzania, in achieving progress like this. we should be in every country in support of the people and in support of the government and their plans. We can't have our own plans. So what we can do is very often provide the convening power, provide the strategic consultation. If you ask many countries, they talk about the projects they're implementing in different countries. In my view, our biggest achievements and biggest contributions are to help a government develop a strong and solid strategic plan, which they would then want to implement, and then we support them in implementing it, rather than having a little project here and a little project there. So a lot of work in the country is done in consultation. I know that the United Nations regularly works in support of the government when they're developing these plans as well as they're implementing. More importantly, our own cooperation framework, our own development plans are based on these national ones. So we're not doing anything else but what is the priority of the country and the government, and maybe complementing that in some areas where we feel that this important principle of leaving no one behind is also adequately addressed.
Mm-hmm. And in your view, what do you think, or what do you see to be the biggest challenge facing a country like Tanzania? And what is the UN family doing about it?
Well, what we see in many countries, and here was a good example, including the 6 months that I have been here, is risk mitigation. We must all, and this country is no exception, be very good in mitigating, planning for and dealing with risks that might be coming. Pandemic risks is case in point. Climate change risk, another one. We must build resilience of the people and the communities to deal with these shocks that sometimes we can't predict. Sometimes we can, so we have more time, and many times we can't. And the United Nations is a good system to help countries with preventive measures, with early warning systems, and with dealing with risks and resilience of the population, especially because it has a vast number of entities that have specialized skills in different areas. I'm very happy that in this country we have, I think, 17 resident UN agencies, plus we have several others who don't necessarily have an office here, but very actively work in support of Tanzania. That allows us a wider spectrum of support activities that we can provide to the country to deal with these challenges.
Mm-hmm. Are there any challenges that the UN family faces while procuring its duties here in Tanzania?
We all have work and jobs because there are challenges that need to be addressed, resolved, improved. I think the biggest challenge for all of us is to develop an appropriate, sustainable plan on what we want to achieve. And this is why I said it's important that we work in support of the government when they're developing the 5-year development plans, because it's important to take stock of what's there and how to deal with it. I think the challenges that we can continue supporting the government in are, for example, how to equally progress towards sustainable development goals. We have noticed through this voluntary national review that Tanzania is progressing better against some sustainable development goals than others. So I believe that we can help them improve on those where they're a bit more behind. I think that the United Nations also has this ability, and I think that our critical role should be in linking them with adequate partners to achieve some of these trade, digitalization, financial sector improvements that are currently hoped and planned for. The main roles of the United Nations is really this strategic dialogue and partnership and convening support rather than implementation of small projects and activities here and there. But we have big roles that we can support. It's very important also to be there for refugees. It's also important to be there for those who need additional assistance, and these challenges will continue, but what is important is that we deal with them as best as we can and as quickly as we can, in order to give us a space when new challenges come, that we can focus on those.
This year we are also marking the beginning of the decade of action, and these are the remaining 10 years leading up to the 2030, when the Sustainable Development Goals will hopefully be achieved. We see the UN is promoting the Building Back Better theme through the Secretary General's campaigns. What does this mean for us here in Tanzania? What does Building Back Better mean in terms of the Sustainable Development Goals? You've spoken about the national review. You've spoken about how the COVID-19 has affected us. But in the midst of this pandemic, do you think everything is being destabilized? Will business ever be back to normal? And what should happen now, going back to leading up to the to 2030? Well, too many questions in one.
Well, I certainly hope so. I certainly hope that we will go back and build even better. I mean, we want to build better because this pandemic in particular, but some other events as well over the past years, have shown us the gaps and problems with many global and national systems that we have. How we can do things in a better way, so when the risks are there, that we're better prepared to deal with the consequences. So we are learning from COVID globally, regionally, nationally, how to build things in a way that will be more sustainable and more appropriate. We are generally identifying critical priorities and trying to deal with them, be it health, be it education, be it in some other areas where we want to work. Social protection is very important. It's one of the areas where we have a very good program in support of the government, the so-called productive social safety nets. And we have been assisting 1.1 million households, but those people usually would be in a much worse situation if they were not assisted. So programs like that could be expanded. It's very important to give the private sector, smallholders, entrepreneurs a chance to do better, to do more, to help them. So there are many initiatives that we are proposing to consider as we're going through the current crisis and seeing some of the challenges and gaps that we face. Since I have arrived here, and then we have had this COVID impact, we have been working in parallel on humanitarian responses and humanitarian programs in order to deal with urgent needs that have arisen from the extraordinary situation. But at the same time, we were doing the socio-economic impact assessment of COVID in order to understand which sectors, such as tourism or agriculture, have been most affected and how could they be revitalized and improved. And at the same time, we're working within a framework whereby we're still not forgetting all of those goals that we have set for ourselves 5 years ago as part of our national plan, or just a bit less, in order to not neglect those as well. So it's kind of a combination of these different challenges and risks that we're trying to address as situation is evolving, in order to make our work most meaningful and most effective for the well-being of the people of Tanzania.
If we look at the SDGs at the beginning, most African countries reflected on the issue of data. There was missing data, and that was a very big challenge. Now, 10 years going towards 2030, we see obviously there's a need for data. I still believe there's a need for data, but I don't know if you want to reflect on this issue of data and how important it is in terms of the remaining 10 years. But also, you've mentioned about the humanitarian issues, and I would like to know if there's anything specific that you're doing here in Tanzania within the next 10 years that you hope will improve the lives of the people.
Well, on the humanitarian side, let me start there. We're dealing with the urgent needs as they arise. When we had floods, we tried to support some of the communities affected by floods, or support the government, support them, really. With COVID, there were increased needs in a number of areas, and we tried to also give our hand there. So, as we go along, of course, these different challenges will need to be addressed. Data is critical for any kind of work, and we could always improve on it. I would say that we're seeing some gradual improvements in terms of data, but there's still a long way. We still need to know more in terms of numbers and statistics, as well as regularly monitor them in order to learn how best to deal with various issues.
And I would like to find out from you, what legacy would you like to leave behind in Tanzania, say 5 years to come from now, 10 years to come from now? How would you, what would you want to focus on and leave a mark on as you work in this country? What is your dream, your vision?
Well, my vision is that people of this country live better with strategic support from the United Nations. In other words, I would like us as the United Nations system as a whole to be supporters of Tanzanians' own efforts in improving the lives of their people. And we have seen, you have mentioned the middle income country status according to the World Bank ranking recently as a very big achievement. I would like to see more of these achievements, which are really being done by the government and the people of Tanzania, where United Nations is really supporting them and giving them that extra help to do better. I would like to see sustainable development goals addressed by Tanzania in an equal way across all 17 goals, rather than some being more better advanced than others. And lastly, I would like us to genuinely continue to improving on leaving no one behind. So those who need most help and support, who are possibly even marginalized in their communities and groups, that they are not forgotten, that they get the necessary attention. So a strong Tanzania with strong economic growth, with people with good well-being, and United Nations being there to support rather than to really do the implementing activities and different things, only to complement those works of the government and to make sure that we leave no one behind.